I think that Trump has a tremendous amount of power even after he leaves office.
Yeah. And I think that, I think it's worrisome. I think
all he has to do is switch from his presidential tone to just embracing violence, and then he has his own army. It's not an army on the scale of the U.S. military by any stretch of the imagination, but it's a terrorist group that is spread around the whole country.
With very little effort, I think Trump could create an American version of, right-wing ISIS.
Welcome to Broke News, presented by Popdust, where we cover breaking stories to break your brain. Except not this week, because actually the election just happened, so everyone's brains are already broken. And we're just going to kind of talk about how crazy and fucked up everything is. And
we could call this a very special episode.
Oh, this one's special. It's so special. At the time of recording, victory has not yet been declared for Biden. Votes are still being counted in a lot of states, but with the most attention being on Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Nevada.
Actually, if you look at, I mainly use the Associated Press, and if you're using the Associated Press, they've pretty much already put him at 264 with Wisconsin and Michigan both in his favor.
Wow.
So the only thing that's really left is for him to win Nevada, and if that happens, that puts him at 270, according to the Associated Press. Yeah. So it's very close to a Biden win, with the caveat that we're probably on the brink of civil war.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, in that sense, I've been looking pretty obsessively at Pennsylvania, because Trump is still ahead in the count, but the way they do the count in Pennsylvania is really stupid. It's really slow, and so they still haven't counted. I think at this point around 1 million or close to 1 million ballots, and as they count, the Trump's lead just shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. So this morning it was 700,000. At this point, it's like 250 or something like that, 250,000.
Yeah, it's right around there.
Yeah, so it is shrinking quickly.
And it's also worth noting that the vast majority of the mail-in votes are going to be Dem votes.
Because Donald Trump told his supporters not to use mail-in voting.
It's so frustrating that so many Republicans right now are acting like these votes came out of nowhere, where in these states, they are not allowed to count mail-in votes until either Election Day or the point when ballots close on Election Day. And since so many people voted via mail-in ballots this year, that means that they had millions of votes that came in on time, that were sent out on time, that need to be counted way too late.
Well, Dan, prove it. Can you prove it? Because just because that's what the facts say doesn't mean that's how it is. And I know because I've been spending most of today fighting with Trump supporters who want to comment on our Facebook page, which has been enlightening and terrifying, and slam poetry and a manifesto and a will all at the same time.
So my suspicion is that Pennsylvania is going to fall narrowly to Biden. It is very frustrating because people are acting, people on the right are acting as though this is, unprecedented and unpredictable, that all these votes will be going to Joe Biden, when that's exactly what people who are paying attention have been saying was going to happen for months.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, Bernie Sanders had that Jimmy Fallon interview where he laid out this exact scenario happening in these exact states, not because of some conspiracy theory, but because of these states' specific laws about counting mail-in votes.
And some of the states cut it off at election day. If your ballot doesn't get in before election day, it doesn't get counted. Others don't cut it off for days. And I think in one case I heard about, it was like a 9-day extension, which is actually pretty important, because if you mailed your ballot, a week ago, the deliberate sabotage of the postal service might have delayed your ballot, so it won't arrive for another few days.
And it's important
we can
to note,
talk about that too. But
it's important to note also that, Trump and DeJoy's fuckery with the USPS, this is exactly why it was such a big issue.
Mm-hmm.
This is exactly why so many people were calling it out, is that this is the exact scenario that they wanted to happen, where
they've been building towards this for a while.
Yeah, where ballots would be getting in either on the day or after the day, and then they'd claim they didn't get there in time. Well, those votes were sent in time.
And the genius of the whole scheme is that then, because of this very predictable outcome that Democrats mailed in much more than Republicans, and they're all being counted after the fact, they now have this absurd grounds, but to some people it looks convincing, to claim that the Democrats are the ones stealing the elections. That's their whole gambit, has been to set it up to claim that Democrats are stealing the election, while actually throwing out hundreds of thousands of people's votes to try to steal the election.
And the incredible thing is, from a game theory standpoint, what they're doing is absolutely brilliant. Like, what they're doing is creating a situation where, regardless of whether or not they win or lose the election, and I think a lot of Republican operatives knew, the smart ones, knew that they were going to lose, they've created a situation where a not insignificant subset of people will genuinely be in a position to be radicalized in any way that they want, with the belief that what they're doing is saving democracy.
Mm-hmm.
So, and trying to give information to that is amazing with the comments. But yes, in the basic layout of the law, in some states you get up to 10, or one was even 17 days after election day is fine, which has been laid out clearly. But as I found, and I'm sure many other people have found today, if you show that and link it and provide the information, replies span from liberal lies or just no. I don't know why, because that is clearly the law. That is how voting rights work in the states. I don't know. I know it's crazy. I know it's crazy to understand.
Where did you get this information? The internet?
No,
I never trust the internet.
Exactly.
Email?
Unless this information is coming directly from WeHateLiberals.com, then it is not fair and balanced.
Oh my God, vote.org? Does org stand for a fascist organization? What? The place where, one site that does this crazy thing of collecting what each individual state has as their law for what they do for voting? I don't know why they would ever try to do such a heinous propagandist thing.
To steal elections.
It's weird that so many of these people are so for small government, but also can't wrap their minds around how different states have different laws.
Wait, they do?
In fact, they do. In fact, the national government does not control local voting laws.
Which is honestly pretty dumb.
Yeah, it's very dumb.
What was I? Oh, right. I wanted to get at kind of the elephant in the room that it underlies a lot of what we've been talking about, but we haven't actually mentioned it yet. There are, on almost a daily basis, more new cases of COVID-19, record numbers every day.
I believe it was well over 1,000 people died last night from COVID.
Right. So yeah, in that context, we had a presidential election in which, hundreds of people were lining up in close proximity to each other all around the country to go vote, except for the millions of people who decided to vote by mail this time because they don't want to potentially infect their loved ones or some strangers with a deadly virus or catch a deadly virus themselves. But those are the people whose votes we're trying now, a lot of the country now wants to throw out.
And it's also important to note that Trump spent a huge portion of the last months of his presidency leading up to the campaign convincing his supporters that mail-in votes were fraudulent, that they wouldn't be counted, and that
you don't really need to worry about the virus anyway.
Yeah, you don't need to worry about the virus, which is why the numbers.
If I can get better, anyone can get better. All I have is the most powerful job in the world that entitles me to the best doctors in the world. And experimental medicine that no one else gets.
Do you remember that story about how he was planning to come out and rip open his shirt and have a superhero?
Oh, really got my hopes up. I thought we were gonna finally welcome him into a community, and his just problems would be just so resolved with love. Because
that's why they call him Big Daddy Trump.
That's why. He's a leather daddy.
Because that cures all, and empathy is the answer to all hatred and fascism. That's correct, right? I read that on the internet.
Yeah, the way that we've historically defeated fascism has always been to embrace the demagogue.
Yeah,
but literally, hugs. Hugs actually physically defeat and suppress hatred. That must be true.
Donald Trump has never been hugged in his life. It's sad.
Oh.
Yeah, so this is fun, and if there isn't a clear resolution to this insane mess pretty soon, that there's a distinct possibility that one or a number of states could end up being decided by the Supreme Court, that Trump has seated three justices to in his term.
Right-wing justices.
Two of those justices worked on the Bush v. Gore Supreme Court case in which the Supreme Court shut down the recount in Florida and handed the election to George W. Bush. Two of the Supreme Court justices that Trump himself seated to the six conservative majority on the court worked for Bush on that case and helped to secure Bush that election.
Now here's a hypothetical question. We were talking before about a situation where Biden, wins as is predicted, and Trump supporters think that the election was stolen. What happens in a situation where, Biden wins as far as we're concerned, and then there is a Supreme Court decision that results in some of those states being given to Trump, and Trump wins a situation that, we know is illegitimate based on the votes? What happens then from kind of a, what do liberals do in that situation?
Right. Oh, I know.
What do leftists do in that situation?
Did you not find out? Did you not get the notification?
From George Soros? The George Soros email?
It's called The Purge.
The Purge.
It's a really elaborate. No. It's not. It's an instructional. It's a visual instructional sort of guideline to what happens now, because nothing will matter and everything is just a free for all. Then it's okay. That's why we have the masks, Dan. This has all been staged.
Wow, it really is. The Purge was a prophetic movie.
Yes. So when you go out and you do what you have to do because of your moral duty, then you can be protected from the blood splatter.
Diana and I are moving to Korea if Donald Trump wins. Yeah. There's also a chance we're moving to Korea anyway. But
if Donald Trump wins, definitely.
Yeah, that secures the decision.
That's just smart.
How's your Korean?
What's up?
How is your Korean so far?
음.
It'd be cool if like
한국말 잘 못해요. 근데 배워야 해요. 하고 don't remember how to say if.
I think it would be really cool.
Russia.
I think it'd be really cool if Keith just said like in perfect Korean, "I love tteokbokki." I don't know how to.
We know that.
Yeah, no, my Korean is not great, but
You know what?
it's good enough to get by. What's up?
Good thing you're a tall white guy.
Hmm.
I hear they love those.
I feel like I could have an acting career in Korea.
Maybe.
It's always in the back of my mind.
Say at least two more things about that.
Okay. Korea has a booming entertainment industry.
Yes.
And they often have some white people playing, Americans or other kinds of foreigners in their like movies and TV shows. But they usually have people with the wrong accents, like Russian playing Americans, things like that. I'm very good at accents, so I could do other accents potentially, but I just speak in an American accent naturally. So
you also do have like such a definitive white guy look.
Yeah.
Like nobody would ever. Yeah. Nobody would ever see you and be like maybe ethnic. They would be like, oh, there is a white guy. And I feel like if you had a movie and you wanted to cast like a white guy in it, like
No, Keith is like a filter. He's template white guy number 2.
I've always said that when I film my evil,
never going to be number 1, but I'm happy with number 2.
Yeah, I've always said that whenever I film my evil Garfield movie, you're a shoo-in for John Arbuckle.
You really have said that, though. That's upsetting.
I've read the script. It's something else.
Oh, yeah. Well,
Hey, I didn't mention this at the beginning of the podcast, even though I meant to, but I reserve the right to interrupt the proceedings with weird news articles whenever I feel like it's necessary. So I'm just going to give you guys one now. Man needs scrotum skin for nipple reconstruction.
What?
Man needs
That's not weird.
Scrotum skin for nipple reconstruction. After major weight loss, Dr. Quart needs to take skin from a very sensitive place to recreate Terrence's nipple. I don't know why weight loss makes you lose a nipple, but...
Why is this even a story? Like, why is this news?
It's not really news. It is something that occurred on an episode of Dr. 90210, which I believe is a reality TV show.
What? Yeah. Wait a minute. No, I don't understand why it's news. Isn't male scrotum made of nipples?
Yeah, men don't have chest nipples, although many of us draw them on.
Yeah.
Or in this case, we get them surgically attached.
I'm familiar.
When the embryo switches from female to male, yes, the nipples travel down through the abdomen and drop out of the inguinal canal.
Well, now that I think about it, guy nipples do have like kind of like those coarse spindly hairs kind of around them, which are very similar to scrotal hairs.
Wait, scrotums have hair?
They do.
This can't be true. I've seen the internet, and this can't be true. Although what I've seen on the internet is mostly animated characters, and I thought that was truth.
I think even some animated characters have hairy scrotums.
Yeah, are you joking? Do you really not know that balls are hairy?
I've never seen an animated penis in my life. Is that something I should see?
Yes, absolutely.
Sure, why not?
Look up uncensored hentai.
But no.
I'm gonna not do that, but I'm gonna say that I did.
Or you could look up naked Family Guy.
Oh.
Yeah, you do know that the balls are hairy though, right?
I thought, wait, oh no! I have to go back to the drawing board now and reimagine everything.
Mm-hmm.
I know buttholes are hairy, but it took me a long time to realize.
Yeah, it took me a while to realize that too.
It's a weird thing that should be not
That shouldn't be hairy.
strange. But
Yeah.
it is strange because you think, what were they thinking when we got designed in the shop?
Uh-huh.
To be like, yeah, you need to stay warm, so we're gonna put hair all over your body, particularly the places that will be clothed and warm already. And it's like, that's rude.
It's actually kind of amazing that like more poop doesn't get caught on like butthole hair, you know?
Enough
was my
does.
immediate
Enough
thought.
does.
Oh my god. What?
Well, like imagine if
Plenty get
somebody
stuck.
was like, well, imagine if somebody was like putting poop through their head hair. There would be so much of it everywhere.
Well, yeah,
But,
I mean, I know. It's like when you take care of dogs and they get poop stuck and you need to cut
Yeah.
out the little poop. It's like, wait a minute, we don't have owners. Are we just missing our owners? Is that what aliens are? Is that why aliens are always coming down to see us? Are they our owners and they've let us loose?
I
They
mean, I
need to
guess
cut out the poop from our poop hair.
I guess that's also what enemas are about, is kind of like cleaning out that whole area, right?
But inside,
Yeah, I guess so.
because we have a lot of poop inside that never makes its way outside.
It's weird to think about.
Well, the end of your
That mean-
mouth is the end of your digestive system. Really, your anus and your mouth are the exact same thing. Dan, you're touching your anus right now. You're touching the other end of your anus right now. Okay,
I
you're
guess
not
that's
now.
true. Yeah, I guess when you touch your mouth, that really is kind of how it works.
Yes.
Yeah, the original form that a human embryo takes. By the way, I want to repeat, in case anyone's just tuning in, life obviously does begin at conception. But when it begins, you're just a tube with just a mouth hole at one end and a butthole at the other end, and they're really the same at that point.
I mean, does a straw
the
have
earliest
two holes
form
or one?
of an embryo is just a tube. What'd you say?
I said like a straw, and does a straw have two holes or one? I mean, that's the question about whether God exists in a different phrasing.
Yeah, that's everything right there. What's the sound of one hand clapping? What's the shape of one hole pooping?
Reflective silence.
If people really are just kind of poop straws, I think it's worth asking the question, do poop straws hold any inherent value?
I think
Oh.
maybe an even more profound, just to bring it up even a further level. Can a poop straw be elected to a second term as president? Whoa.
This is getting transcendent.
It's happened in the past. It happened to poop straw W. Bush.
So I don't know. I was giving us the option to get back into election discussion, but we also don't have to. If there's more to say about scrotum nipples or any of the related
Wasn't
material.
George W. Bush so
W.
smart
Bush.
looking back? Wasn't George W. Bush so smart looking back compared to now?
He's always
No,
looked a little chimpish.
I don't think. No, I don't think she was saying smart looking. I think she was saying smart looking back.
Oh.
No, I don't think he was smart.
You-
Not even compared to Trump. I think Trump is just as smart as Bush. I just think he's less concerned about the world. He's more entirely focused on his own ego than anyone in the world.
I see what you mean. Yeah, I think there's a good sign of intelligence of like, when you have a thought but you don't say it.
Mhm.
Like, I like to grab pussy. You think that because everyone does, but you don't say it. And then when you don't say it, you show a kind of intelligence, like, a chimpanzee like acting differently when the scientists come into the lab and they like quiet down. Like that's a real admirable kind of intelligence that
Uh-huh.
I really miss in our highest office.
Yeah,
True.
yeah, that'll be. I don't know. There's something to say for Trump's complete lack of self-awareness, though. Like he could have been, if you could retain his like xenophobia and authoritarian impulses and add on a little bit of self-awareness, he could have been much more effective. So,
Oh yeah, I mean, I think if you had somebody with Trump's inclinations who also was better about like kind of playing the political spectrum,
yeah,
I think we'd have a situation where kind of as has been happening for the last, really since like the Nixon administration, you'd have America continuing to move further and further into insane fascist right-wing territory, while also simultaneously having the left not care as much. Or maybe not the left, but the kind of centrist Democrat majority not caring as much. Whereas with Trump, because of how impolite he is, you have a bunch of like, kind of liberal, like wine moms and kind of like centrist, like, my tax kind of guys, or my fund kind of guys who are like, gay marriage is okay, but I don't want them taxing me anymore.
yeah.
Would not have really ever jumped onto the like we need to get this guy out of the office wagon. They'd have just kept voting middle of the line. And I mean, we did continue voting middle of the line,
Yeah.
but
there is a surging left movement that is different conversation. But yeah, I mean those guys who got on board for Biden were they I'm sure they were critical in Biden winning this election as he's about to do. But yeah, it would have been interesting to see if the Democrats could have taken, a small step back from like their corporate backers and embraced a little bit more economic populism and allowed someone like Bernie Sanders
the
to get the
other,
nomination.
I mean, last night really did feel like a Hillary 2.0 situation in a lot of ways. And I'm kind of wondering, like taking a step back from everything, how do you think Bernie would have fared if he had been the candidate?
So I think it's in these kinds of totally hypothetical situations, it's impossible not to project a little bit of your own biases onto onto strangers. So my inclination, projecting my bias onto the world, is that a lot of the strangers who don't vote or maybe vote Republican for for gun rights or something else,
Or like an outsider candidate?
yeah, sure. I mean, certainly in 2016, maybe voted for Trump as an outsider candidate. I think a lot of those people could have pretty easily been won over to the idea that they don't have to pay for better quality health insurance, and they deserve, for working 40 hours a week, they deserve a certain level of basic comfort. And if they lose their job, they deserve a certain level of basic comfort. I think that's a pretty appealing message to a lot of people who either don't vote or vote Republican for reasons that are less important to their daily lives. So yeah, right. I think Bernie would have done it just as well, if not better, than Biden by, scaring off some of the centrists, but attracting a bunch of people who either don't vote or vote for other reasons and have never had the opportunity to vote for somebody who has their economic best interests at heart.
Oh, I definitely feel the same way, and I do. I mean, I know a number of people who, personally, I don't know anybody personally really who voted for Trump, but I do know a number of people who didn't vote because,
Oh, damn.
or at least who didn't vote for either major candidate, not necessarily that they didn't vote in some capacity, but they didn't vote for either of the major candidates because, they don't feel that either represents their interests. And I think that there is some validity to that in a lot of ways, although I think as like a straight white guy, I don't feel that I could have not voted for, like, I hate to say it, the lesser of two evils in this situation, despite the fact that I disagree so heavily with the larger system and the whole idea of a two-party system, and the whole idea of voting for the lesser of two evils in this situation with Trump as the the opponent. They're really, I didn't see it as having another choice. I think that if I was, somebody who is disenfranchised in a major way who came to that same decision, I think that, I wouldn't necessarily fault anyone for that.
Yeah.
But,
no, I think our best option is to pretty early on in Biden's presidency, maybe let him get a couple things done. But I think our best option is to apply whatever pressure we can to either get him to resign or totally fold to progressive.
Yeah, I mean, I plan to be so hypercritical of Biden throughout his presidency.
Yeah.
It's one of those situations where, I voted for him. I have no love for the guy. The whole idea that, and I mean, I don't know how he feels about it now, but the fact that early into his campaign, he was like, nothing will fundamentally change, that is so not okay with me.
Yeah. No, and I think, honestly, I think Kamala Harris is a better option.
Absolutely.
She's far from perfect, but I think she's a better option. And if we can apply pressure to Joe Biden to the point where he has an easy out, he's an old man, he can just say, I've spoken to my doctor and my health is not where I want it to be. So I'm, leaving it to the next generation. I'm passing the torch.
Yeah, he'll just get up and be like, I'm hitting the road, Jack.
Exactly.
Yes, that's exactly what he would say. I have one dominant thought imagining Bernie Sanders as a candidate. But just a really deep insight that I did come across today. My 3-year-old niece was chanting Trump's name during the election results while my 7-year-old niece was chanting Biden. Mostly the 3-year-old so she could antagonize her sister, but also apparently, as she reported very seriously to her mother, Biden scared her because he looked scary with his teeth. So that's just
scary with his teeth.
I think the frightening part of that, though, is that a 3-year-old has been so desensitized to what Donald Trump looks like.
Oh, no.
His appearance is not frightening.
I debunked it immediately. I knew he should be desensitized because it's very clear she loves cartoons. Trump looks like a perfect caricature of an animated villain. She is very used to this. She is no longer frightened. She is not afraid. Biden resembles a man, but a little bit wrong.
Yeah, Biden does have like a real set of choppers.
Yes. He looks like a person and then just he tilts his head and then you're like, oh no, this is used to be a person. I don't understand. But
I still think Trump is so bizarre looking. I think she's just been exposed to him.
There's something really grotesque.
I don't think him. I do think she is used to watching just absolute batshit cartoon villains. But
she can't have existed for the last 3 years without being hyper exposed to Donald Trump's image everywhere. So yeah, he's probably somewhat more normal to her. The cartoon theory makes sense, but I just think when you're used to some weird-looking person, they start looking a little less weird.
Could be, depending on how much politics run in that household. But yes, my one thought about just if it was Bernie, which I had a hard time getting my head around in general, but my dominant thought was that these guys who maybe felt like showing up at protests for people who at places where votes are being counted, I think that reaction would just be so much worse. That's my only thought, based on the fact that I do have a few people, at least one of them quite close to me, who did vote for Trump, and in my past few days excavating why and having conversations about why, the blankness that they have in their minds and accepting the rhetoric and the amount of manipulation and lies and attacks and twisting facts, it would be so extreme they would believe it.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of people would believe it enough to take up arms in some way to say he's going to try to kill us all. We have
that makes sense.
Fire guns at
no, see, I don't think anyone, or I don't think a substantial number of people can look at Bernie as nefarious. I do think that they can see his politics as fundamentally nefarious. They could say he's the wacky old guy, whatever even if he means well, it's going to lead us to evil. So yeah, I think it could definitely make the divide much starker.
I do hope that in the future, and I think that if things do move largely in a positive direction in the future with, more like millennials and younger people coming into power with more progressive ideologies, I do think historically people might look back on Bernie Sanders as the greatest political candidate to never be elected to president.
I like that idea.
Yeah, maybe that's fair. I mean, it's exceedingly rare for someone to be, such a close runner-up in 2 primaries in a row.
And with such fervent support both times around, I think the real shame is that the term socialism in America has taken on this kind of
anathema.
Yeah, and it's just capitalism has failed. It has largely failed, and I think that there are so many people in America who subscribe, who have incorporated capitalism into the idea of their identity as Americans, and they are people, so many of them, who have been crushed by capitalism. You have these dudes out in the Midwest living in fucking dumpster fire shacks, and they're capitalism, and it's it doesn't cross their minds that the people whose interests they're voting for look at them as pond scum. They're not.
Yeah.
Capitalism hasn't helped them. If you're the kind of guy who lives in kind of a shit trailer or something, you're not benefiting from capitalism. You're not the guy bootstraps are applying to. You're the fucking proletariat.
Well, I think people have been conditioned to think of capitalism as a term meaning just stuff that you like products and services that you like, which, hey, I really like the products and services that I like. I like having a choice of different products and services. That stuff is pretty nice. There is a pretty significant way in which we can still produce a lot of great goods and services and divorce that production from the insane inequality of what actual capitalism is, which is if you have wealth, you grow that wealth. And fundamentally, it has to grow faster than the rest of the economy, which just enhances the divide between the top and the bottom.
Well, I think it's because a lot of these people are too I mean, quite frankly, at this point, quite too stupid enough to recognize that there is a possible reality where everybody has food, everybody has healthcare, everybody has a house, and you can still work as much as you want to afford $10,000 watches. Like, both of those things are possible within a country as wealthy as America. America has so much wealth in it that every single person can have a house, every single person can be fed, every single person can have healthcare, and you can still have people who do whatever they want to afford their fucking anime statues. Like, you can do that. That's fine. That's a perfectly valid system.
Who would ever spend a noticeable amount of money on an articulated anime statue?
Or a non-articulated anime statue.
Either way, they're both good.
Yeah.
Who my thoughts aren't even on that, because my thinking is just that all of that line of thinking is still, as reductive as it is, it's still on a level of evolved thought, and which I am not familiar when it comes to who I know voted for Trump. But most of those people are from the Bible Belt in the Midwest, in the sheltered areas, and I am quite shooketh by how many conversations I've had that just devolve into a moral understanding of black and white, of, well, this is good and this is evil, so I will vote for good instead of evil. That's really a first wall that takes quite a bit of time to break through, if possible.
I mean, it's really scary to me, as somebody who's spent a lot of time on various portions of the internet, like arguing with these kinds of people at various points. It's something I don't do as much anymore, because I've come to realize that it really is just useless.
Yes, it is.
But it is really crazy to me how a lot of the time when you talk to these people and you get a sense of what their ideologies are, there really is no depth to them. Like, there's no sense of nuance. There's no sense of deep, they've really deeply thought about it. It really is kind of, they're just regurgitating things. They're just regurgitating very broad concepts that they've been told. And it's really hard when you talk to somebody like that. And I realize how elitist this is going to sound, but it's very hard to view those people as on an equal level to you when you're talking to them and their level of thought about something just seems like it stops at such a shallow level that, it's like they
There's
were
a block.
It's a completely different paradigm, and it does have a complete stymie right from the beginning, or even before you start.
And I think there's a reason that a lot of the time when people like this do change their minds, it's because something happened to somebody close to them.
Right.
It's because there really is such a...
shocked out of accepting that simplicity, because simplicity is so much more appealing than complexity on a fundamental level. Sometimes it takes a shock to disrupt a simplistic approach.
Yeah, exactly.
That is my experience in the last few days, not too many days ago anyway, of when I did change a mind. I believe I can say, according to their self-reporting afterwards, I believe I swayed a Trump voter to not vote for Trump if we had had a conversation not mere hours after they had voted. But that's how that happened. But my take on that, Dan, would be I see what you mean. I would say that my understanding is, when really breaking this down and getting into their thought and knowing their lives, being close enough to know their lives very well, it's fear response in a weird way of just that, very shut down. I can see two things in front of me. One of them is what I fear and one of them is what I want, and it's just, that's all. And then it does take a lot of something, of weaseling, finding a connection, and to say, well, you care about me, or you care about so-and-so, or this happened, this terrible thing that happened to you, this trauma that you've shared with me, imagine if it happened to you every single day. And then there is an awakening that's sometimes possible, but it does take that self-interested, let me dig into your traumatic psychology and translate everything into your experience because your empathy response in your brain has just been shut off for this moment.
It's so weird to me how, like, the things so many of them fear, though, because so many of the things they fear, I mean, I think one of the linchpin points for me is how much so many of them seem to hate trans people. And the vast majority of them don't know and have never met a single trans person in their life. But
or maybe they have and they just don't even realize it.
Yeah, oh, yeah. That's
Likely.
definitely, very possible. But just like the idea that for them, it's like it matters to them so much, the hypothetical idea of like somebody out there who has a penis who identifies as a woman. And like the idea of that.
Well, and they don't even tend to think of, trans men. Like, that's not on their radar. It's only trans women who they think of as men because potentially they have a penis.
Yeah. And, the level of when you look at right-wing discourse about, trans people, just the amount of vitriol and hate that they direct towards them. And my question is always, why does it matter to them? Like why does it scare them so much, the idea that somebody out there might live a life that's different from theirs that doesn't affect them in any way? And sometimes with these people, it's like they'll have a child and the child will be trans, and then they come to a crossroads where they're either like trans bad and they ruin the relationship with their kid and possibly ruin their kid's life, or they're like, oh my God, I was wrong all along. My kid doesn't know a single trans person, but they are trans. I must have, I might need to question my beliefs.
Yeah, belief seems to be a very operative word in that the people I know who hold those beliefs are, again, the Bible Belt, and it does have, and it's never failed to impress me in many decades how everything relates to the Bible.
Keith and I were talking about this earlier, but there really is so little difference between those types of people and ISIS. They're so little
doctrine,
difference.
Doctrine is toxic if used as a weapon.
The way these people operate, the kind of ideas they have, the way their brains function is so parallel to ISIS, and the kind of inclination to enact Sharia law on everybody who doesn't agree with you. I mean, that's exactly what a lot of the Bible Belt is. They want to push evangelical law on people who don't agree with them.
Yeah. I do think it's important to note, though, that like being a liberal or a leftist does not excuse you from having some of these ideas of, these tendencies to oversimplify issues.
Of course not.
And that's kind of just a human impulse.
It's easier. It's easier, and it makes thinking about things in black and white terms makes everything easier.
Well, and I think leftists, I think we have our own versions of this that maybe not so much the people in this room, but people in this Zoom chat, but leftist movements often tend to embrace very black and white lines of this is the only correct answer, and we're not interested in any nuance off of this, because nuance opens us up to, I don't know, objections or to hatred. And I get the impulse, but actually I have a headline here that I want to give to you guys as kind of an example of this. Maybe this headline will kind of challenge some of the simplicity of your thinking. Just going to put this out here. Edinburgh doctor claims chicken nuggets can cure autism.
I'll be right back, guys. Hold on.
I mean, if this were true, the vast majority of 4chan would not be autistic anymore. So clearly there is a lot of evidence that this is not true.
But hold on, maybe 4chan has just picked up on it. Maybe the value of chicky nuggies is that they, they help to alleviate some of the symptoms.
Mm.
And eventually, if you eat enough of them,
If
your mom is good enough
mom
to
brings you enough tendies, you stop being autistic. Incredible.
Yeah.
My mom failed me so hard.
I'm so sorry, Dan.
Well, that's the old belief, was that, it was cold mothers, unloving mothers who caused autism. And if you can measure love in tendies, maybe it's true.
That sounds like a good title for a book. If you could measure love in tendies, the autism story.
I think you've been living that story for quite a while, Dan. I think it's time to put that to paper.
For a long time.
Hmm.
I've actually always had a pretty diverse palate. I've always been willing to.
Have you?
Yeah, there are some foods I don't like really in any capacity, but they're very few and far between.
How
How
do you feel
pleasant
about raw
for you?
oysters?
I love raw oysters.
Ew! Get
Not
out.
for me.
Get
Love
out right
them.
now.
So good.
Your vote doesn't count anymore. You don't deserve one.
But I'll tell you what food I hate. Onions. I hate
The fuck
onions.
is wrong with you,
Cooked
Dan?
onions?
Huh?
Like onion rings? Cooked onions?
I hate onions in really most capacities outside of caramelized. If you caramelize the onions, I like them. But if you don't caramelize the onions, I kind of hate them no matter what you do to them.
Well, those
Onions
the
are a
best onions,
delightful
but-
surprise.
So you don't like onion rings?
I don't like onion rings. I don't
Oh.
like how when you bite into them, it's like if they're not fried well enough, it's like you get the fried part, which is nice, but then you get kind of like the gross slimy onion and it pulls out of the breading and you're like, gross.
I'll eat your gross slimy onions. I'll eat them all.
That's crazy. I love onions. I really did not like onions as a small child, but yeah, I got over that.
The other thing I don't like is chunky tomato sauce.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I would have to see an example of specifically what you mean, but I have issues with tomatoes myself. So
I don't mind like kind of small chunks in a tomato sauce, but if the chunk is too big and I bite into it and there's like just too much of a solid tomato in it, I'm not a fan.
too much tomato.
I find that uninteresting, but I respect your opinion. See, it's not that hard.
All right. Do we want to get back to election stuff again? I can find out what the latest with Pennsylvania is.
I have been checking before.
Let's find out.
Well, I was thinking the only thing that was alleviating some of the left establishment angst, or at least with the Democrat establishment, with a friend, was just saying, I haven't been a Democrat in 10 years because I am a registered independent, which has many problems, and we are essentially feckless and possibly surrounded by centrist or both-siders, but it just feels so good to say fuck you to both, even though they don't care.
Yeah, that is appealing. I'm still a registered Democrat because I want to vote in the primaries.
I am as well. I think it's very stupid that you have to register a certain way to vote in the primaries. I think I should be allowed to vote in both primaries to decide who I want to be, who I want to go against each other.
Well,
I also think that there shouldn't be two parties. But
yeah, we just need ranked choice voting, and then if we had ranked choice voting, it would be fine to have closed primaries because you could register as a Green Party person and then vote for your Green Party person, and your second choice could be, I don't know, centrist. Charlie Center.
Yes.
Or whoever the Democrats pick.
I have a useless thought experiment that I haven't even Googled to read about as far as overthought think pieces on the internet, because it's just so improbable I can't bring my mind there, of just what could an independent president ever look like, even though it will never happen? Because all I picture right now is Keith Sutherland, because I watched that fucking show, Designated Survivor, for 3 seasons, just for the dream, just to hold on to the dream.
His name is Kiefer.
Oops. I was looking at your dumb face, and you all white people
Uh-huh.
look alike.
That's fair. The results in Pennsylvania, by the way, Biden's or Trump's lead has narrowed to 212,000 votes at this point, with 89% reporting. So at the current rate, if the current shrinking of Trump's lead continues, then probably Biden's going to be slightly ahead. By the time 100% is in.
As expected.
Mm-hmm.
Is that wild to you as a Pennsylvanian, Keith, or?
No, Pennsylvania has gone to Democrats in. I think they went to Bush in 2004, but other than that, they've gone to Democrat.
Yeah,
except for Trump.
Yeah,
they went in 2000. They went for Gore. They went for Obama both times.
Okay.
Trump was a narrow victory in 2016. It was that was upsetting.
Yes, my impressions are spoiled by northern Pennsylvanians and growing up with them. Warren, Erie, those shitholes.
How dare you?
It is really crazy to me that Trump really genuinely did seem to expand his base so much over the past 4 years. I think of all the things last night, that really was the most surprising to me, was that it didn't turn out like huge numbers turned out, and it was like all of them were like Democrats who hadn't voted. It was like huge numbers turned out, and it was like a lot of them really were like kind of either newer Trump supporters or people who supported Trump but didn't vote the first. I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, I know the thinking behind at least some of them was it came down to something so simple as the other side says he hasn't done anything, but I know 5 or 10 things he has done. So I'm going to vote for him.
I got my taxes, or I have on my paycheck an extra $20.
That's about it. Those micro.
Well, and
not even.
He gave me a temporary tax cut and bundled in with that permanent tax cut for people who make way more money than me.
Yeah. But really,
Also, he called Antifa a terrorist organization, which is very important to me for reasons that I will let Fox News explain.
They're burning down cities, and I base this off of a video I saw of the Middle East.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm glad they've finally labeled New York City an anarchist jurisdiction, because I went there a couple of years ago, and some guy sold me a fake Rolex, and I'll never get over that.
It really is
Lawless
crazy.
Place.
I feel like I've spoken to a number of like right-wingers at this point online who genuinely believe that like New York City is on fire. And it's like kind of baffling to me.
New York is the Disney World of cities. New York has been yes, the protests in what did they peak in June? I think.
Yeah.
When the protests were at their peak, there was a lot going on. But generally speaking, New York City is like the most sanitized city in the country. But it's an anarchist jurisdiction, which as anarchists, as actual anarchists point out, like I don't agree with them on a lot of things, but they're worth listening to. And as they pointed out, it's a contradiction in terms. The concept of a jurisdiction implies a hierarchy, which anarchists, are against.
Well, Keith, I think you're missing the fact that the time I visited New York, I saw a person with blue hair.
Wait a minute.
Oh, man. I really wanted
I lived in New York and I had blue hair.
It's very possible that you're an anarchist.
But I wasn't from there. Oh, no. It's a misconstruing.
I was this close to doing a spit take and destroying my computer. The timing was perfect. I had a mouthful. I know, but it would have been so funny for a second.
We'll set you up next time.
Okay.
What was I going to say, I mean, New York City. I mean, if you've ever been there, more than once, you'll see there's a lot of Black people here.
Yeah,
That's what every relative I've ever had who visited me says in a whispered voice.
That's
you want to know what my dad commented on when we were driving through Brooklyn? He saw a Black guy, probably in his 30s, but whatever. To my dad, he was a young Black guy with a baseball bat over his shoulder, and he made some comment about the Black guy with a baseball bat. We're like, oh, you mean the guy like walking with his kid, probably to like a baseball field?
No. You see, Keith, your dad saw the Warriors in the 70s, and he knows what's up.
Oh, that's true.
Yeah, then the Black guy said, "Old white dude, come out and play, yay!"
Oh my God.
Very scary.
That was awful. That was the worst thing that's happened to me in the last 48 hours.
Are you not familiar with the Warriors, Meg?
Dimly, but not you.
Okay. All right. Is there do we have maybe some final thoughts on the election? This is conversation.
Move to Korea.
Yep.
Yeah, I think we're gearing up for a very scary next 2 months. I think Biden's pretty clearly, in my mind, going to win legitimately through mail-in votes, and we're going to get kind of a definitive answer on that by Friday. And I think after that, I have no fucking idea what happens.
Yeah. I'm fairly confident that Biden will be put in office in January as normal, because I think there are too many states in which things are contested. I don't see the Supreme Court as fucked up as it is right now. I don't see them taking a stance that like 3 or 4 states, results need to be overturned and handed to Donald Trump. But we'll see.
All right, you guys. When the race war happens, okay? Are you listening to me? I'm not supposed to tell you this, but you've won me over and our bond is strong. Listen, we're each, us, people of color, we each get 2 passes to give to white people. All right? And we're not supposed to tell you guys, but when it happens, you find me, I got you.
Nice.
Damn, you have very little faith in my marriage, but
okay.
Oh
yeah, wow.
No. It's only people of color who are citizens, Keith, not
okay.
not legal residents who have been here since infancy. They don't count.
If Alyssa's half, does she get 1 or 2 passes?
See, we haven't had a referendum about that yet.
Uh-oh. All right, well,
we have elections too. It's amazing.
Well, and maybe if she only gets 1 pass, maybe she has to use that on her white half.
It's possible.
Yeah,
it's very possible. Meg, I actually might need your pass after all.
All right, guys. On that note.
All right, guys.
We'll talk soon.
Stay safe.
Yeah.
Bye, comrades.